cruising in my lane fast, call it high speed. I've been working hard, yeah, I've been working nightly. If you think you'll win, nah, unlikely. I be taking shots, yeah, cold-blooded, icy. Watching numbers grow is what I call sightseeing. In the front row, run it up when they hype me. The following grows, they know how to ignite me. Call me CEO, I've been running right, see. And I ain't playing games, I create my own lane, making pleasure out of pain, turning losses into...
Hey everybody, welcome back to State of the Steelers, guys. I'm Daniel J, and alongside with me is somebody you might recognize, none other than Behind the Steel Curtain editor himself, Mr. Dave Schofield. How you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm good. I'm ready. It's always a good time to talk Steelers.
Oh yeah, for sure. You know, I know that. How was your Father's Day this week? And happy Father's Day, by the way.
Oh, it was pretty good. It was. I don't like to be a downer, but it was really tough because, you know, my wife, she tries to do stuff for me for Father's Day with my kids, but it was her first Father's Day without her father, who had passed away earlier this year. So it was a nice weekend, but at the same time, it was also that kind of milestone. So it was a mixed bag, but hey, I got to sit back. I didn't have to cook any meals. I didn't have to do any dishes. I was good.
That's good. I kind of had the same thing. My wife and my kids kind of took over for the dad duties, cooked some hamburgers for me and whatnot, and then we got to enjoy some time at the neighborhood pool. But it was a great time. I enjoyed it. And so not sure if everybody knows this or if I've gone over this, but I started podcasting, or I got the itch for doing this from last year, going on live with Mr. Schofield after a Denver game. You know, yeah. I hadn't thought about it before then. You know, I thought about maybe going and doing something with I have some animals and stuff, some dogs, but I hadn't really thought about it until then. So, you know, I hadn't had the opportunity to thank you, but, you know, thank you for giving me that proverbial itch, so to speak, to get to do this and to start this. I appreciate it.
Well, hey, no problem. But remember, the whole reason that happened is because I helped you find your season tickets.
That's true.
So
is true.
That's why we had to meet up at the game, and that's why we ended up going live for the show for BTSC. So that was great.
That was great. And guys, I did put the link to that video in the description. Please, you know, if you guys want to go catch that, you'll get to see me from about 10 months ago. But with that being said, the team has kind of changed a little bit since. You know, let's go back to draft night. I want to ask you a couple questions about that. You know, number 19 goes up. Steelers are on, no quarterbacks coming in. Who were you thinking the Pittsburgh Steelers were going to select in that moment, and what was your reaction after the selection?
Well, it was so much fun because we had a Zoom meeting with the staff of Behind the Steel Curtain. It was my idea to set up something because we couldn't all be together. So we said, well, at least it would be great to have some guys in there, you know, talking about how things are going to go. And Jeff Hartman had that on one of his podcasts where he actually played the audio from that pick. But I always said leading up to the draft, well, not always, well, I often said is the way I should say it. It all depends on how the draft fell on whether or not the Steelers should take a quarterback. If the quarterbacks go quickly and early, like we see so many times when people downplay the quarterbacks and then everyone jumps in and grabs them, like even Mitch Trubisky, who's with the Steelers, that when he was drafted number 2 overall that year, that was I still didn't expect quarterbacks to be going that high in that draft. And I thought, well, maybe the same thing happens this year. If a couple quarterbacks, you know, 2 or 3 go before the Steelers, don't take a quarterback. That means other good positions will be available. It all depends on how the draft plays out. And it played out to where all the people that I thought the Steelers would possibly take were gone. You know, if this person fell or that person fell. Now, there was still a couple that were left that I would have been okay that I thought were around 20 quality, if you understand what I mean there. Right. But with their choice of quarterback, I was completely ready for it to be the quarterback there because of the way the draft played out. I always like to remind people that a lot of stuff can happen between pick 1 and pick wherever the Steelers go. So based on that, I knew it was going to be one of those two. And part of me was like, I wanted to know who the Steelers liked better because I didn't really mind who it was going to be. I had some people that I had discussed things with about, they had taken, you know, oh, the Steelers aren't even going to consider Kenny Pickett. They haven't been talking to him. I'm like, he's in the same building. Of course,
That's
they're
true.
talking to him. You're just not hearing about it. I was fine with whoever the Steelers felt was the best quarterback in the draft that they took him at number 20. And that's exactly what they did. And I trust their feeling about which quarterback was better, much more than mine. And saying the next one wasn't taken for quite a long time, I'm still more content with how it's going.
Awesome. Awesome. Do you think that if the Steelers went somewhere else that Kenny Pickett selected in the first round?
Ooh, that's a great question. I can't even remember who was picking after the Steelers now that I think of it. I don't honestly. I'm going to say yes, because even if those teams behind the Steelers might not have been as quarterback needy, I think someone would have traded up into the end of the first round for Pickett. I think that, but at the same time, we'll never get that question answered for
That's
real.
true.
But in my mind, I think that someone would have made a move to go get him. And honestly, it very well could have been the Steelers if they would have gone a different route and not picked a quarterback that someone else that they might have even traded back up in for him.
Exactly. And you kind of said it out there many times not to fall in love with any pre-draft
Yep.
people, because they might end up in purple, and that's exactly what happened to Kyle Hamilton for me. And so
No, Kyle Hamilton was one. I don't know if you would listen to me about that one or not at all, but he was a player that I'm like, if this guy's still there at 20, even if that guy's still there at 16 and you can trade up a couple spots to get him, I would do that for someone like him, because I think he is if he would have been in the Steelers system and how they would have utilized him. I kind of don't like him being in purple, because I think they'll utilize him very similarly as how the Steelers would have, but he wasn't the right fit for a lot of teams. So I would have been I'd have been ecstatic with that pick if that's who the Steelers would have had, but he was gone. A couple other ones that they said might have dropped, they were gone. It made sense for the Steelers to do what they did.
Yeah, I agree. I was that guy I was looking forward to. My heart sank when he went out in 14. And then I thought to myself, all right, the way the draft is falling, we're getting a quarterback.
Yeah.
And at the time, I should have thought back and looked back at, if we were going to go with the quarterback that has the potential, then I don't think we would have signed Mitch Trubisky, because we had the potential quarterback in Dwayne Haskins at the time. And so I guess there was a little bit of clues there kind of indicating that we're going to go with somebody who was probably a little bit more ready. Because I believe that it was Desmond Ridder who was rumored to be the second quarterback in the Steelers hierarchy, so to speak. And so, that's great. I think that going forward, we're going to have we have an open camp battle. Do you think that it's legitimately a three-way battle, or do you think that that's just for, the audience and the fans to hear?
I could give you an awful lot of unpopular opinions, because I gave some unpopular opinions after the draft. I'm still sticking by my opinions right now, and I think I got more credence behind them than what I did right following the draft. Is I don't know that it's a three-way battle, and I don't know that Kenny Pickett's the other guy that's battling. Right. I don't think that the Steelers ultimately want to start him week one of his rookie year, unless he comes out and shows so much that they can't hold him back. It's not an open competition to where if one person's a little bit better than the other, then they're the winner. Now, to me, for Kenny Pickett to get that job, he's going to have to be head and shoulders above both the other guys. Right. And my big unpopular opinion for people is, if Kenny Pickett's not your starter in week one, I don't think he gets a helmet.
Oh, wow. So you don't think that using his mobility that they wouldn't design a certain package for, maybe even in the red zone?
I don't think the Steelers like to change up their quarterback. It's set, and if the job of the backup quarterback, now remember, we've just been through 18 years of Ben Roethlisberger, and you weren't taking Ben Roethlisberger off the field. The Steelers could completely change and do stuff crazy. They could go back to the slash era and try to do stuff like that. We don't know that they will, but we've never seen it. So how can we expect it? My thing is, if your backup quarterback stands there on the sideline with the helmet on when the offense is out there and with the helmet off otherwise, just ready to go at a moment's notice, I feel if they stay with the quarterbacks that they have and they don't trade anyone away, and I'm not saying they should, but when they traded away Josh Dobbs, that kind of opened up that door that everyone thinks that that's what the Steelers might do. It all really depends on how things fall with other teams. If they're really looking for someone and the Steelers are willing to do that. But if the quarterback room doesn't change with the Steelers all the way up until where they have to make their roster cuts and into week 1, I think that the Steelers would rather have the player who's come off the bench before to be the guy ready that he would have to come in the middle of the game if there's an injury. Now, if something would happen to the starter, that doesn't mean that I don't think Kenny Pickett wouldn't start the following game. But I don't know that they want his first NFL snaps to be coming in and having to, face with a 3rd and 9 because the quarterback got, it was second and 2 and he got sacked and got knocked out, dinged up, and he has to come out for a play, and that's going to be his first play in the NFL. I don't know that the Steelers would like that. If you think about it, I don't know if that's a big Steelers move. I could see them playing the safer route of the more experienced person getting the helmet on game day. But ultimately, if the starter they go with doesn't get the job done, then I think Kenny Pickett's first action will be as a starter. I just don't even know if it'll be this year.
Got you. I agree. I mean, they didn't draft him 20th overall to not start him eventually.
Yeah.
He's definitely going to be the heir apparent, or at least given the opportunity to be the heir apparent. So this year, you're anticipating that Mitch Trubisky is going to get the helm week 1, or do you think Mason might?
Everything's lined up for that. I mean, I honestly thought there was a possibility that they would still have the pecking order going into OTAs as even having Mason Rudolph, simply because he's been with the team, that it might have gone Rudolph, Trubisky, Pickett. I said, but it might be Trubisky, Rudolph, Pickett. Those were my top 2 choices of what I thought it was going to be in OTAs. And it was Trubisky, Rudolph, Pickett, which tells me that they are satisfied with the NFL experience with Trubisky. I think it's his job to lose. And not only would he have to lose it, but someone else would also really have to gain it. If no one has a good camp, it's going to be Trubisky. If everyone has a good camp, I think it's going to be Trubisky. The only way that it's not is that Trubisky doesn't have the good camp or gets injured and someone else really steps up.
Yeah, I agree. That's kind of the way I thought it was going to kind of lean as well. And then once OTA started up and they automatically made the default quarterback Mitch Trubisky, that kind of pointed all the arrows in that direction. Sticking with the offense, my biggest question that I've been kind of telling everybody happens to do with the running back. We're pretty top heavy in that position with Najee Harris. Behind him, we don't have anybody that is proven. We have Benny Snell, who happens to be a running back that has to pound the ball, for 3-4 quarters before he starts making his way. And with Najee Harris in front of him, I don't think that's the possibility. You wrote an article on the undrafted rookie. Do you think that he has a potential to be that second running back behind Najee to spell him a little bit?
Well, honestly, there's 2 of them. There really is 2. And I right now, I would give the slighter advantage ever so slightly to Mateo Durant out of Duke. Nothing against, I'm trying to remember. It's Wyatt. I'm pretty sure Wyatt's his last name, not his first name. I just know it's in there somewhere. Who played 1 year, I'm pretty sure, at Oklahoma State after coming in from some other colleges. But I think Durant is of those 2. But really, it could be either one of them. Think about this. The Steelers, they lost one player off the 53-man roster at running back in Kalen Ballage. They didn't address the position in free agency. They didn't address the position in the draft. Now, I think they'll keep one less running back on the roster than what they did last year. To me, I think it's that way because of I think they'll need it for their I think they'll keep an extra receiver because if Gunnar Rowe is going to be the return man, but that could all play out later on in training camp. But there's an opportunity. It's not like Anthony McFarland was getting snaps last year. No. It's not like Benny Snell was doing much of anything other than special teams. There's an opportunity for anyone that can show they are capable to not just the roster spot, but to grab the helmet and to be the next guy on the field for the Steelers. It's open for the taking. So all one of these young guys has to do is just step up and grab it and show that they can pick up the offense quick. They can give something different to offer the Steelers, play some special teams, and I think it's wide open for anyone. And that's why I'm also still in favor of the Steelers still bringing in another free agent at the position.
Well, they have one more position open, isn't that correct?
They only have 89 on the roster because they released a defensive lineman. I think that was in anticipation of the Tuzar Skipper signing, but then also Stephon Tuitt retired. They didn't bring in another body for the last couple days of mandatory mini camp, and they're probably going to be looking to fill that spot here in the next few weeks.
Do you think that spot's going to be filled? It's going to be Omar Khan's first outside signing or re-signing?
Well, technically, it's Tuzar Skipper was the first one. If you really want to get technical,
that's true.
Because that came just after everything, and for all we know, that could have even been negotiated before he was officially. I can't remember the timing of it all, but yeah, they'll have someone. Some people are even saying maybe they're still keeping a spot open in case things aren't working out for otherwise, and Joe Hayden wants to come back cheap. Maybe they were looking for a veteran running back. Maybe they're making some calls about defensive line. All of these things are moves that I think that the Steelers could do, but I don't think they have to. Some people really think, we have to have another defensive lineman. When I say that, I'm speaking as the Steeler fans.
Right.
But the Steelers really, numbers-wise, they don't because, they lost. Tuitt wasn't on the 53 last year, and now they're gaining Alualu back, and they're gaining Leal. And they have young guys that there's going to be someone who was on the team last year that's probably not going to make it already, let alone if they bring in another one. But the question is, are they top heavy enough? Like you said about the running back. To me, if the Steelers are going to make a move at some of those other positions, go top heavy. And I don't know that there's top heavy people out there. Specifically, it's something like a cornerback or whatnot, but I'd be fine with another running back thrown into the mix or something that, I don't want them to just waste the spot with someone that's going to come in and not really have a shot to make the 53. I'd rather them actually make a move to bring in someone significant.
Nice. No, I understand. I agree as well. So do you think that move isn't for a starting position? Or do you think that all starting 22 offensive and defensive players are on the team currently?
I would be inclined to say yes, but history tells us no. That the Steelers especially, last year they added 2 starters. Basically, one of them was right around now, and the other one was in August. They added 2 starters after minicamp. So if I could see them trying to upgrade something, but I also don't see that after minicamp that there was the glaring need like there was last year. They had that glaring need when they knew DeCastro was gone. So they had to go out and get someone. The Vince Williams thing happened the day before training camp. My goodness, they had to do something then. So there could still be something. The reason I think maybe that could happen, I wouldn't be shocked at all if there's some sort of, I don't hope it's not a big injury or a nagging injury to someone that they want to come in and pad another position with someone who could end up ultimately being the starter.
I agree. I think I think right now, as long as injury doesn't occur, or nothing significant doesn't occur, that the 22 starters on offense and defense are implemented on the team already. I think that we need a little bit more depth. I read an article from you today about the biggest hole in the defense and which, who we think that where that position may be. I personally think it's the outside linebacker position, and I can go a little bit more in depth there after I ask you. I don't recall in the article, and I read it twice. Did you answer the question?
No. Of course I didn't answer the question. That's not fair. I put a poll in the article for people to vote on. I wanted good discussion, which there was great discussion in the comments. I posed the question, and a lot of times I will pose a question, and if anything, I'll chime in the comments, but I don't want to necessarily lead people in a certain direction. Now, I have to admit, when we were picking the best Steelers game of 2021, I was doing it as a bracket style when you voted, head-to-head games and things like that. And when people put the Week 18 win over the Ravens into the finals, I kind of was a little bit biased with my description of that one because I'm like, the Steelers didn't even play that well in Week 18. They played better against the Ravens the first time when the Ravens were still good. And they put that game in over the Buffalo game. I'm like, really? They played, that was their best game of the season playing wise. But I had no problem with the game of Ben Roethlisberger's home debut winning, as long as it wasn't that Week 18 game in Baltimore. But so I try not to lead people into things with my articles if I'm ultimately trying to get the question. But to me, my biggest concern, I like your answer of outside linebacker, because where do you go after the top two? We don't know how they're going to implement Jannard Avery. I've done, if you aren't familiar with BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, your one-stop shop for all things Pittsburgh Steelers, with all our articles there. I do an article series each week. It's with Jeffrey Benedict. It's called Steelers Vertex. I look at the stats line. He looks at the film line, and they come together at a single point. That's the Vertex. It's nice and nerdy. And we looked at Derek Tuska, or Tuska, or however Jeff sometimes says Tushka. I think it's Tuska. And could he actually be a guy that could be the rotational guy? He really showed some stuff at the end of last season, but not as an every down guy. If you're worried about injury, then you have some problems. But see, it's a lot harder when it comes to something like cornerback than outside linebacker, because cornerbacks, those guys generally stay on the field the whole time unless they're the sub package guy. The starters are a lot of times get 100% of the snaps. So I could see where people are concerned at corner, because you don't have that glaring number one guy like they've had with Joe Hayden since 2017. So that's a reasonable answer. I'm probably the most concerned, in all honesty, I'm going to go with inside linebacker, because Miles Jack, I feel, is a more athletic version of Joe Schobert, but once again, it's someone that the Jaguars didn't want, just like it happened last year with Schobert. They're going to come in. Can Devin Bush get his speed back? I think it's all about his speed, 100% of what he's dealing with, and getting his speed back from the knee. He may never get it back. Or he might. It might have taken more time, more off-season working out and not simply rehabbing. There's a lot of questions there. And although they have a lot of bodies at that position, I don't know that they have someone like last year when people are like, why do they keep Devin Bush out there? Why don't they bench him? Why don't they? Really, did they have another option that could step in? I mean, Devin Bush at 85% was still better than the next guy at 100%. So that's why I'm a little concerned about inside linebacker, because I could see it turning out really, really well, but I could also see it going in the other direction.
Well, there's been a lot of rumors that the inside linebacker tandem, that Miles Jack is going to be considered the quote unquote Mac linebacker, and Bush is the Buck. For those not familiar, the Buck would be Vince Williams type linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
Would you prefer, knowing that Miles Jack is the Mac, would you prefer the tandem of Bush and Jack, or Spillane and Jack, knowing that Spillane's a little bit tougher? I mean, everybody remembers that hit on Henry against the Titans a few years back. You know, he also had a pick six against Lamar Jackson, and shows to be more of a cerebral type of linebacker. Which one do you prefer? I mean, if it was a Merle Hodge, I think he'd prefer Spillane in there over Bush.
Well, I want to go back to the whole Mac Buck issue. People are so caught up on the role of the Mac and the role of the Buck. Oh, well, the Buck is the guy that's got to take on, the offensive, shed the offensive lineman in order to fill the gaps for the run game. And really, Mac and Buck is only about their alignment. The Steelers, we don't know, with linebacker coach Brian Flores, with a new defensive coordinator with Terrell Austin. Just because they're in that alignment doesn't mean that they're going to keep the roles the same in today's NFL. They may no longer want what Vince Williams did in that role because of who they have. They might have a little bit of different thing. It just is going to, it's going to be where he lines up. It might not have to be the same thing. If they're going to try to have their Buck linebacker be the same roles and responsibilities that they typically have with the Buck linebacker over the years, I don't know that Devin Bush is that guy. I would probably take the Robert Spillane. But to me, saying that Bush would be lined up there, I don't think they're going to be doing the same kind of things. I really don't. And I'm really curious to see what they're going to do because I'm not really sure. But if they think that you can just put Devin Bush in there and ask him to do the stuff that Vince Williams did, that's not Devin Bush, in my opinion. So I think, although it could be aligned that way, I don't think they're going to have him do those responsibilities.
So then when we play against a Baltimore Ravens team that's very physical, puts in a heavy offense and wants to run the ball, or we going up against a Nick Chubb that we're going to need a physical linebacker, are those games that we may not see Devin Bush as often, do you think? Or do you think he might? How do you think that's going to happen?
There's a lot of stuff you could do. There's a lot of stuff that they could do. And honestly, you really want to know the truth? I'm not worried as much about, let's say, the Ravens. Mm-hmm. Brian Flores already showed that he knows what to do to take care of the Ravens. To me, if all the Steelers did in hiring Brian Flores was to say, you know what, stay in your office all season, we're going to pull you out for 2 games, both times against Baltimore. Come do your thing. You take over. You have the game plan. You do that. I'd be ecstatic with that. I'd be fine with that. He showed last year with Miami. Oh my goodness. He knew it. It was brilliant what they did. And to hear guys like Jeffrey Benedict and KT Smith break those things down and explain what they did, that's great. So to me, when you go up against somebody like a Cleveland or a Baltimore with the possible rushing attack, I could see them utilizing even more players, like using another safety like KZ and playing 3 safeties and having someone like a Terrell Edmonds way up in the box, acting as another speedy linebacker, if you really want to think of it. So then you're talking about, do you really have the big physical bruiser? No, but if you instead you have 3 speed guys, that's a whole different element to have to defend as well. So I think that the Steelers, it's all about the game plan. That they wouldn't have to necessarily come in with the spleen, or they could go with a 3 linebacker look, or they could even do the whole Jannard Avery coming in and filling in where Melvin Ingram used it a little bit last year when they had Ingram, Highsmith, and Watt on the field together with various things. I can see the Steelers mixing up their personnel and asking players to do things that we don't normally see from them in order to try to combat some of these offenses that you don't see all the time, combat them with defenses you don't see all the time. So they could go, that's one of the multiple ways they could go, where they could say, hey, Devin Bush might not even see 50% of the snaps in a game like that.
Yeah, and those are the games that kind of worry me, is when it comes down to the physical game, or when we have to have him cover a receiving type tight end, a tall one especially. But we'll see. I mean, I've often said that I think that Brian Flores is going to bring out the best in the tandem of Devin Bush and Miles Jack. Last year, Jerry O, who was their position coach, wasn't there due to a death in the family, and so
his wife
that played huge, for that position alone. And so there's no excuses this year coming into it. He's got his position coach as far as Devin Bush goes. He's already another year removed from his injury. It's really a prove-it year for him. But focusing back on the offense, I have a question. Okay. Where do you think that Connor Hayward plays? I looked at his skill set, and it was very similar to a Thaddeus Moss. And, Thaddeus Moss isn't, as far as height, weight, speed, stuff like that, maybe not, running back ability or things of that nature. But as far as the tight end goes, do you think that Connor Hayward has more to his game than a Thaddeus Moss does? I mean, he played running back, so I'm assuming so. What do you think about that?
To me, Connor Hayward, you're going to fit him somewhere on the roster. Like when I do my 53-man roster prediction, you got to put him into a position, but he's not. He's not. And he's one of those players that you just want somebody that offers something different. To me, the best way to describe it is the way Kevin Smith described it on Here We Go, the Steelers Show podcast through Behind the Steel Curtain network of podcasts. He said he's an H-back. He's the guy that's like a tight end, but not necessarily going to be lining up on the line of scrimmage. He's more of a wing, more in the wing position. He's the guy that can run a jet sweep. He's the guy that can also come off and block. He's the guy that can go out for the pass. He can do so many different things. It's kind of like that quarterback that's your big rushing threat. Like Lamar Jackson, when he came in with the Ravens, he wasn't like any other quarterbacks that were playing at that time. You had to do so much different things because he played the quarterback position, but he was doing such different things with it. To me, that's what the Steelers have in someone like a Connor Hayward if he shows that he's up to the task, because he's not a player that fits the mold of a tight end or the exact mold of a fullback. He's someone that you take because you kind of see it as a little bit of a different type of player. And I can't remember who was doing it. It might have been Jeffrey Benedict through Behind the Steel Curtain that talked about taking the Steelers offense and equating it to the players that were so dynamic that year where Matt Canada was the offensive coordinator for Pitt. Right. And he basically took those guys and said, okay, so now you got Najee Harris. He's the James Conner. All right. Now you got Mitch Trubisky. He's just got to be the Nate Peterman, then I can't remember the name of the tight end / H-back guy that was, rushing the ball and everything else. I can't remember because I don't watch enough college football. Right. And they said, oh, well, if you can get, Calvin Austin III up to it, you could be talking about there's the Quadri Henderson and things of that. It all depends on what you want to do with your offense. And you could have you want a diverse skill set of your players, but at the same time, then when they're not available, it's really hard to do the same things. Right. I don't see another tight end on the Steelers roster like number 88. Like Pat Freiermuth. If he isn't available, they're not going to be able to do the things that they could do otherwise because they don't have another player like that. Their other tight ends have different skill sets than that. But that's kind of what the Steelers are doing. But if you have that many different players and that many different skill sets that you can utilize them, my goodness, the defense will know what's coming.
No, I agree. I often said that we can go in big with the skill set that we have. We can go in a big formation, have a Freiermuth, a Gentry, a Claypool, and Najee out there and pull them in close if they want to come in, light, and then spread them out if they want to come in heavy. And so
you've heard me say that too. The dash, haven't you?
I have.
Favorite. I want that 22 formation. I want, personnel package. I want two running backs where one of them is a fullback, whether it's Derek Watt or even Connor Hayward as a fullback, two tight ends and a big wide receiver. And you think they're going to pound the ball. And then next thing you know, you've got trips on one side and someone else out wide and they're stuck in a jumbo defense and you can just, and they can't defend everybody. If you have variety in what you can throw out there and the creativity to get it done and not be predictable with it, my goodness, the world is your oyster.
I agree. I think that if we can get that, going and we can get our quarterback situated and he can make the right decision, just be a decent quarterback, we're going to surprise some people. I don't think that, Ben Roethlisberger, when he started his career, he was in his first 2 years, he was good, but he had a lot of, supporting cast around him. He had a defense that was amazing. And
they didn't ask him to do a lot. They really didn't.
They didn't. Yeah. So, he was also a quarterback that wasn't coming in, predicted to be the starting QB. Now, I know a lot of folks tried to, compare the two situations. I'm like, it's a different coaching. It's a lot of different things going on.
But I'll also remind you of this. If Charlie Batch doesn't get hurt in the preseason, Ben Roethlisberger doesn't have a helmet in week 1.
No, he doesn't.
He would have been inactive. Just put that
how that no for real and how those dominoes fall. I mean, Jerome Bettis probably doesn't end his career, with a Super Bowl ring. Mm-hmm. And so, it's crazy how that situation unfolded. And I think that also played a huge downfall towards what Mason Rudolph is going through. Yeah. I think a lot of people, when Ben Roethlisberger went down in 2019, I think there was a lot of similarities as how Ben Roethlisberger came into the league. Tommy Maddox had an elbow injury. Ben Roethlisberger had an elbow injury. And when Mason didn't live up to what Ben was able to do then, I think he's taken a big rap to everything, and it's about expectation. Do you think he's going to be on the 53 when it comes time to week 1? Do you think Mason's going to be there?
If I had to bet on it, I would bet yes, because it would take somebody else's circumstances to change and for them to seek out something from the Steelers in order for him to not be there. That's just my opinion about it. Think about it. Who would have thought that Josh Dobbs wasn't going to be with the Steelers in week 2 of 2019? That the Jaguars were going to reach out and offer something for him. And of course, that's the irony that, he gets traded going into week 2 and Ben Roethlisberger goes down in week 2. Because think about that. There would have been no Duck. There wouldn't have been he wouldn't have been the next guy. It would have been Dobbs. It would have been there right behind Rudolph in that situation. And who knows how that season would have played out. It might have been better. It might have been worse. You can play what if all day.
Right.
So he does take a bad rap because that was the original question, right? Was about Rudolph.
Right. Yeah. Do you think he's going to be on 53?
Yeah, and I think he'll be on the 53. And because you said about him getting a bad rap about not being able to step in the way Ben did. But I do think it doesn't, just because he's not the guy doesn't mean that he doesn't have value. Right. In all honesty, he could still add value. And it's not like he's expensive. He's only got 1 more year on his contract. There's really, it's not like they should just kick him to the curb because they should. That's just not the way I see the Steelers really doing that, because next thing you know, you're on your 3rd quarterback of the season. If things go bad, like in 2019. So it doesn't really benefit you to just say, oh yeah. Now, if he doesn't earn the job, he doesn't earn the job. But I think he'll do well enough to even be at least whispers. And the fans might hate this, but there'll at least be whispers of the possibility of him being able to snag the starting job. Therefore, the only way I see him not on the 53 is if someone does approach the Steelers for trade.
Got you. Do you think that maybe perhaps the confidence in maybe Pickett as a quarterback from the fans might change if he doesn't beat Mason for that second job? I mean, there was a lot of talk when Mason didn't beat out Dobbs, his rookie year, for that second string position. And
honestly, speaking as the fans, that's our problem, because we read too much into that. And that's not the progression that the Steelers like to take with a quarterback. It's really, Ben Roethlisberger wouldn't have had that progression. So the Steelers aren't going to rush them. Everyone's, he's the most pro ready. He's 24 years old. He's a quarterback. He can play till he's 42. That you're not worried about a 24-year quarterback. Are you worried about a 24-year-old running back? The Steelers took one last year. Yeah. So I get why there you would want to start him right away. It's not as big a deal for quarterback. And him being the most pro-ready in this draft doesn't mean he would have been the most pro-ready ever. It doesn't mean that he would have been more pro-ready than Trevor Lawrence was. Trey Lance was the number 3 overall pick the year before, and they don't know that he's going to be ready this year. So it's okay if that's the progression. And so I think sometimes the fans just get a little bit too eager, and they need to trust this organization who has shown that they are, over the decades, the greatest franchise in professional sports.
I agree. We are a fan base that's a little bit spoiled, and just a little bit. And and we've been known to be well known to be overreacting, and so. But that's the great thing about
who doesn't.
That's true.
Pick a fan base that doesn't overreact.
That's true.
One that's not used to winning. That's who it is.
Well, the Dallas. I live in Texas, and the Cowboys. They're not really used to winning here recently. They won last year, but outside of that, they'll go 4-10 and still think they'll win the Super Bowl that year. It's outrageous, the fan base there here in Texas.
Yeah, but you're exactly right with the Steelers being spoiled. Steelers fans being spoiled. I got to go back and look at this number because I heard conflicting things. I don't know if it's 2, if it's 3, of how many games Ben Roethlisberger played in his 18-year career out of what was it, 247 regular season games where the Steelers were eliminated from the playoffs.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you're talking he played hundreds of games, and he had less than a handful of games where the Steelers were no longer in contention to win the Super Bowl that year.
Mm-hmm.
Because even going into the last week, you're playing a game where you could make it, you still have a chance to win the Super Bowl. Because that's all they showed in 05. That's all it takes is to get in. Right. So that really is, to me, that's spoiling the fan base. And I know people like to talk about 3 wins in the postseason in the last 12 years. I'm actually working on something for the website. I'm trying to, if you don't mind me asking you a question, because this will help.
Go ahead.
Who was the quarterback when you first became a Steelers fan?
Neil O'Donnell.
Okay. See, that tells us the difference between, to me, the different eras and the different generations of Steelers fans sometimes set your expectations. The first quarterback I remember, Mark Malone.
Oh, wow.
That's the first one I remember. Malone and then Brister. Was the one, because that's my sister, who wasn't following as much as young as I was, says, because she's even a year older than me, said, I remember Bubby Brister. Said, I remember Mark Malone. Mm-hmm. But part of what I'm going to be saying in this article was when the Steelers won the Super Bowl in the 2005 season, I was in so it would have been 2006, February 2006. I was almost 3 years married. Mm-hmm. I had been a Steelers fan since I was in elementary school. Right. And I never believed that my team was going to win the Super Bowl because they went one time my senior year of high school. I watched all these other teams do great things. That wasn't the Steelers for me. So for me, when I actually saw the Steelers win the Super Bowl, that's something that I didn't expect to see in my lifetime. And then I saw them do it again 3 years later. Wow. So my expectations of people like, they haven't won in the postseason, but they've been right there every year. That's something I didn't have as a kid growing up. So I think when you start being a Steelers fan, kind of sets up your expectations for the future. That's just me.
I agree. I mean, I started watching the Pittsburgh Steelers probably around 1993. I think that was the year we went and lost to Joe Montana against the
So
Chiefs.
You don't remember Chuck Noll?
I don't. See, my first coach my first coach was Bill Cowher. Yeah. And, I never thought that there wasn't growing up, there wasn't a game I didn't think the Steelers could lose, going into the game, even when we had those years where, in the the 2003 season, when we went the year before we got Ben, I thought Tommy Gunn was going to come back and do something and we're going to make a run. I didn't think we were going to go 6-10 that year. So,
I mean, even when the Steelers made the Super Bowl, that was my senior year of high school, the 95 season. They were 14-point underdogs. I was pulling for them to go, but I never really I was so used to growing up as a kid of this, the Steelers aren't going to win anything. They were good back then. That's not who they are now, was kind of my mentality. I didn't expect them to win that Super Bowl. I really went into that Super Bowl and was surprised how close it was because I was more used to disappointment. So year after year after year after year of the Steelers being right there for the playoffs has me ecstatic as a fan that time of year, where other people just see it as a disappointment because they're not playing deep enough into January.
Yeah, that Super Bowl loss in Super Bowl 35 was or when we lost to the Cowboys. I live in Texas. I didn't go to school for a week. I was heartbroken. I was in 5th grade, and that was my biggest heartbreak at that point. I'm super superstitious. I hadn't missed a game, while watching the football season. The year before is when my superstition started. I missed the San Diego Chargers Steelers championship game. And when I came home, I was like expecting us to win because I think we were like super favorites. I was like, I don't even need to watch this game, but we're gonna go to the Super Bowl. And I came home and my dad tells me we lost and it's because you weren't here.
That one was disheartening. It really was. I mean, here's one. I missed the playoff game. It would have been the 2002 season. because my soon-to-be wife had made arrangements to go to the, what was it? We were going to like the Air and Space Museum in DC. Yes, in January. That makes a lot of sense. But with her sister and her boyfriend and all, she had it all set up, and I'm like, but the Steelers are. No, this is important. This is about family. She didn't get it then. She gets it now. She still looks back at it and can't believe it. But I got back just in time to watch Joe Nedney win an Oscar. That was the game that I only saw the very end of, and talk about not wanting to see the end of a game.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. Me and my wife, we just got married. Our first anniversary will be this upcoming December 24th, which we'll be taking on the Raiders that day. So I need to come up with something that for our anniversary dinner that it's involved somewhere where the game is on.
There you go.
That's going to be a tough one to miss. But yeah, man, I really enjoyed this, David, or Dave. I'm so
I go by either.
Awesome. I really enjoyed this. I'm glad you were able to come on. Do you have any questions for me or anything like that?
Well, I was able to ask you the one that I was really curious about with the first quarterback you remember, because I really think that does kind of set your expectations with stuff with the Steelers. What game are you going to this year? Do you have it arranged yet?
I have one game arranged. I will be going to the Tampa Bay and the Steelers game.
Oh, that's a big one.
Yeah, me and my wife, we made arrangements. I've never seen Tom Brady play. I would like for us to beat him and see that happen. I wanted to go see I was almost going to go back in 2015, and I should have when we played him and Joe Hayden had that interception. I should have just gone. I also regret not going to the Browns game last year, the last home game that Ben was at. Those are the games I regret. I might be going to the Saints game. One of my employees that I work with, he's a huge Saints fan, and so we might be heading out there to go see that game. What about yourself? Which games are you going to go out to?
Well, that's really interesting, because I met with my brother-in-law yesterday, actually, and I thought he would possibly want the Jets game, and I would take the Saints game for early in the season. But because his son, who he likes to take with him, is still finishing up fall baseball, looks like I'm going to have the tickets to the Jets game, and he'll probably go to that one. Then it's going to be probably either the Ravens or the Browns game, the very last game of the season. But I can, and that's assuming that somehow Behind the Steel Curtain doesn't score a press pass for any of the games. Because if we manage to do that, then I would be there, but not in my seats.
That would be amazing. Well, if you do go to the Jets game, my channel here, we're giving away 2 tickets to that game. Yeah, we're giving away 2 tickets to a subscriber. We'll be announcing that on July 4th. Subscribers out there, please hit that notification button, because you'll have to be on the live to win those. And look at this, Dave Schofield from Behind the Steel Curtain will be in the section.
I should be there. Yeah, whatever. We're only one row apart, I think, but you're closer to the other aisle than where I am. You're inside the uprights, aren't you?
Yes, I'm inside. I'm right smack in the center of them.
Yeah, because I'm just outside of the one upright. And when I saw those tickets, I'm like, oh, try these. These are good. And I'm glad that worked out well for you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, me and my wife enjoy them. We love them. We went to 2 games last year. We went to the Denver one, to the Seattle game.
Because that was the back-to-back home games, right?
That was back-to-back. Yeah. And talk about a difference in weather. The first game was extremely hot.
Oh, wasn't
it? Wearing all black wasn't the best choice.
Yeah, if you remember, because you met up with me there, I had my son who was 10 at the time, and he's like, "Is it always this hot, Dad?" I'm like, "No, it is not. There's most of the time you're cold." But yeah, that was a warm one.
Yeah, we were sitting in the heat, and then go from that game to the Seattle game the next week. It didn't rain during the game, but before the game, there was freezing rain. And so it was like 38 degrees at one point or something like that, or 42, and it was just starting to rain. And I was like, and then the wind in that stadium was
But crazy. You were the turnaround. I mean, they were 1-3 going into those 2 games, and you were there both victories. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, no, and I thought that those two games there alone, they both ended very close. One went into overtime, the other one went
Yeah.
into the last play. And both of those games, in my opinion, the Steelers had well control of. I felt that
Yes.
we last year, I didn't think that we played a complete game at all. We either went up early in the beginning, like
No.
those two games, and then let them come back, or had to come back at the end. I think that without Ben Roethlisberger, we can't be in those type of games.
No.
I
Well,
think that's the one thing we lose with him.
it's the tale of two halves. I kept saying it all last year. It seemed like which are the Steelers going to play two halves of football, even in their best game of the season, in my opinion, was week 1 against Buffalo, which part of that I go to show people is that what happened, the Steelers had all that extra time to prepare for that game. And I feel that was one of the few times all season. Why can't I remember his name? The other the coach for the Buffalo Bills from William and Mary, Sean. I wanted to say it's McDermott. I almost said McVay. Okay, Coach McDermott. That's to me that was the one time all season he was outcoached. Maybe against Kansas City, but he was outcoached by the Steelers. So I say people want to complain about the coaches. You give them time and you give them the players for their game plan. Look at what they did to Buffalo. But even in that game, they were down 10-0 at halftime. Defense did the job. Offense didn't do anything that whole entire first half. And that was their best game of the season. There was too many times the Steelers were a tale of two halves. You look at the playoff game, my goodness, the Steelers defense did what no one else had done all season, and that was hold Kansas City scoreless for 5 straight possessions.
I agree.
And yet the offense did nothing.
No, I had a Achilles tendon rupture a couple of years back, and when TJ Watt returned that intercept, that fumble recovery for a touchdown was the first time since my rupture I jumped. And so,
the defense couldn't have done anything more. I mean, they 5 straight possessions, no score, and they put it in the end zone.
Yeah, and
yet. Then you're like, oh well, Kansas City scored a bunch of points before halftime because the defense should have been 3rd or 4th quarter number of possessions that they were defending by that time, but they weren't because the offense just couldn't get going. And I know what your point is the offense would start really slow, the defense would keep it in it, and then Ben Roethlisberger would just kind of throw the team on his back and do what he does and find a way to win at the end. You don't know if you have that anymore. They need a much more sustainable offense for the entire game. I think you are spot on with that.
I agree because that was one thing that Mike Tomlin had said that when things get tough, that was my phone I threw on the ground before it started. When things get tough, that Ben didn't change, and that's been Ben since he was in his rookie season. He was clutch throughout his entire career, and that is something that I don't think I've seen in the Mitchell Trubisky or Mason Rudolph. It's unknown in Kenny Pickett if he has that, ability or that coolness or moxie to keep his composure during those tough times. But that's to be seen. So right now we're definitely going to have to put our team on our backs.
Yeah.
But with that being said, we're getting kind of close to that hour mark. I appreciate you coming out here, Dave. Please let us know where we can find you. And before you let us go, give us a record prediction.
Okay. Well, you can find me on Twitter if you have forever for the rest of the show, because I have as many characters in my Twitter name as I'm allowed to have. It is STLR Superfan Dad is my Twitter handle. If you take that same thing, but you add the @gmail.com, that's my email address. But the bigger thing you can do is you can go behindthesteelcurtain.com. You can click on any of the articles where I'm the author, or you can even just go in and look under staff, and I'm going to be right at the top with Jeff Hartman as editors of the site. You can get my information there. But and you can hear me on the Behind the Steel Curtain network of podcasts on Tuesday nights. I'm live right around 9 p.m. Pittsburgh time with my brother on the Scobro Show. Then Thursday nights, we're on our YouTube and Facebook Live channel around 8:30ish for the Steelers preview with myself, Jeff Hartman, Brian Anthony Davis. And then my Steeler Stat Geek is our audio only. It's part of our audio only platform. It's in the mornings. That's on Thursday mornings. You can just search anywhere for Steelers or Behind the Steel Curtain, and we'll be Obviously, you type in Behind the Steel Curtain, should be the top choice, but you even type in Steelers, it'll be one of your top choices anywhere you find podcasts. And there's our channel. But it's not just me. We have a great lineup of podcasters with all that, and the website, all backed by SB Nation. We are the Pittsburgh Steelers site for SB Nation. And thank you so much for having me on. This was fun. I'll just talk about Steelers. I'm glad I could come on and do this with you. I got to go my record prediction. When I did it game by game, when the schedule came out, I was called both a homer and a hater based on my record prediction, because people thought that's way too many games, and some people like, oh, that's not enough. They didn't like that I had the Steelers losing certain games, but then they still felt that my record was too many wins. I'm like, you can't have it both ways. That one was 11-6. I think I would be very happy if the Steelers went 10-7 this season, as their first season without Ben Roethlisberger. I think 10-7 would get them into the postseason, and more importantly, I want to see them hit that 10-7. I want the majority of those wins to come in the last quarter of the season. So to be a team that's rolling into the postseason, not limping into the postseason. Because I think it's not just about your record. Those last 4 games, I really feel, can really set the precedent for what you're going to be doing in the postseason.
I agree 100%. I'm pretty much on par with you. I'm at the 11-6 with my prediction. I think we're going to do a lot better than most people anticipate. And I think we're going to surprise some folks. But with that being said, guys, oh, by the way, this is right here. That's my wife. She says she can't wait to meet you again.
That was a good time. Saw you guys before the game, saw you after the game, went on the show. Yeah. That was a really good time.
It sure was. Well, that's going to do it for us here at the State of the Steelers, guys. Please hit that like and subscribe. Until next time, peace.